Grand Rising YouTube. This is your melanated warrior, Hebrew Heinous, and this is another installment of Facts Over Feelings. Leave your feelings at the door so we can get to the facts, because the facts are the only things that matter. And we're about to get into something. This is about to be a real special and extremely deep segment. I'm telling you, if you got time, make the time. This is going to be a lot deeper than this. Is going to blow the base 60 out of the water. We're going to go over a lot of those things, because some of the things from that video will help to, or the information presented in that video will help to clarify some concepts that we're going to introduce into this segment. We're going to get ourselves up out of the mud in this segment. Clarification is needed, right? And because, like we talked about all the time, the only way that we're going to be able to get closer to the facts is through rigorous deductive reasoning, okay? Reading comprehension. If you cannot understand what you have read, then you cannot read. And this is going to be a roller coaster ride full of emotion. I'm even going to give you a couple of my personal experiences, coupled with some of the experiences of others. Some names will obviously be changed, but just to protect them, some of these individuals want to remain in the background. So, of course, we're going to respect that and honor that. And I just want to, start this off by telling a story. Two stories. And trust me, we're going to get into the meat of this. But remember, everything that I say and talk about is going to come full circle. So don't get relaxed with anything that I say. Don't get relaxed with anything that I say. Everything is going to come full circle. It's interesting. I'm going to tell you guys a little story. Start off with a personal story, because I need to let the FOF squad know what was going on. I'm going to always keep you guys abreast. But I put the information out there to a couple people who I talk to every now and then, just to see, just to vibe and to see what their reaction would be. Because, of course, you get a better perspective of what your moves are when you acquire information from people on the outside looking in, or an opinion from the people from the outside looking in. So I know you guys, many of you guys didn't know this, but I was going to make a move to the UK, right? Go to London and start some things off there in terms of trying to get the book off the ground, right? Just thinking that the literary circles there may help to propel it to the next level, get engaged in the socio-political framework. And it was just, it's a move, because usually when I sit stagnant for a while, I try to make major moves, right? And do what I can do in order to acquire the resources necessary to put me in a better position, and obviously take care of my son. That's always my focal point. But sometimes I can miss the mark. Sometimes you can get so blinded by your habits that you fail to realize that you have to take you have to consider every variable, but you many times you have a one-track mind, and we all know how that all works out. But anyway, so I told a couple people, and it was interesting. This and I won't say her actual name because she likes to remain in the darks, but she's from California, and she said, "Can I give you a call?" I was like, "Yeah, go ahead and give me a call." It was kind of late, so she was just like, you think I can give you a call? It's not too late, because obviously you know that they're 3 hours behind. And so when she, I mean, y'all, like I said, this segment will be full of you're gonna laugh a little bit. Hopefully you even get emotional and tear up a little bit in terms of the information that I bring out. But this, like I said, we'll tackle every emotion here in this segment. This is going to be a very powerful segment. But anyways, I digress. The point is that she basically gave me a verbal lash, and I thought, when I when I picked up the phone, she was like, "Hey, Rue," and no, I mean, of course, there were we started off the conversation the way any conversation starts off, but she was just like, she got straight to the point. She was like, "Look, I feel like you running. And the only time I run is when I work out." She said, "That's the only time you should be running. And I think that you're running. You got a whole son here." She's like, I've made it with my daughter here. It's been hard. I've had to live an uncomfortable life in order to do that." She said, "But we need you here. You are part of our tribe. We're going through things. There's no way you're going to be able to fix the problems here in this country by moving to another country." And I necessarily didn't look at it like that. Obviously, with me, I'm looking at it like, I'm just obviously trying to expand. I'm trying to put some things together so that, maybe some doors open up there that couldn't open up here. But the thing that she wanted to place emphasis, what she placed emphasis on, and what she got me to realize, which I always say to people, but sometimes, man, when you hear it, especially when you hear it from our women, it's very powerful. And she just told me, she said, trust the process. You have to trust the process. What you do is not what anybody else does. And so, but you have to trust the process in order to make this a reality. And that was very powerful. So I call her Xena because she's definitely a warrior princess. And remember, everything that I say, commit to memory, because the title of this segment is very powerful. This is Project Power. And we're going to, the movie Project Power with Jamie Foxx, I hope that you've seen it on Netflix. If you saw it with these two eyes, we're going to make sure that you see it with this one. If you saw it with these two eyes, we're going to make sure that you see it with this one. Okay? So the important thing for us to understand with this Project Power is that if there is no black woman, there is no power. When you know black women, you know power. Huh? Let's say that again. When there is no black woman, there is no power. When you know black women, you know power. And I've been fortunate enough. Now, I haven't had great experiences with every woman that has walked into my life, right? Or me walking into theirs, however you want to see it, or us walking into each other's lives. But for the most part, like I've told many people, my mom she's just recently undergoing some troubles in her marriage, but she's been married. My sisters are married. My aunties is married. My grandmother's married. I remember very important events in my life where one of the most, the greatest experience, one of the greatest experiences I've ever had in my life was being able to visit my great-great-grandmother in Tupelo, Mississippi. So if you're in Tupelo, Mississippi, or somebody's in Tupelo, Mississippi watching this, more than likely you're probably related to me because we have the largest family in Tupelo, Mississippi. But it was just a phenomenal experience to engage with her. It just, the respect and the admiration, the adoration that was being shown by the family, and it just was an amazing experience. And to be able to meet her before she passed away was just amazing. It was just one of the greatest experiences in my life. So I've had women wake me up. I've had a woman by the name of Tangela who stayed in Atlanta. And I was the first, she exposed me. I mean, when I met this beautiful sister, oh my God, I had seen her. I was on the southbound train coming from 5 Points, and I seen her. And I ain't gonna lie, at first it was kind of physical because I seen her from the back, and I was like, holy shit. Tangela was strapped. But when she turned around, she had this young face. I swear that she was like 20-something years old. But she was actually like in her 40s at the time. And I was in my late 20s. And I just couldn't believe she looked that young. But we end up exchanging information. And I remember coming to her house one day and going in the room, and she had all these books, so many books that were just bursting out the closet. And I was like, you got an extensive library going on here. She was like, yeah, I know. She just loved to read. And I remember she took me to the West End, Shrine of the Black Madonna. We were going to a function that was being obviously held or organized by Dr. Delbert Blair. I had no idea who this guy was. And it was incredible because I remember he had a document that needed to be read. He had his glasses on. He said, well, I can't really see it. Do I have any volunteers that come up here and read? And so I raised my hand and he said, come up here. And then when I was reading, he said, you're a phenomenal reader. He said, you got a purpose. And I was like, and I never knew the dude, but I was, obviously I enjoyed myself. The information that he brought out and how he disseminated his information, his joy to educate his people. It was another great experience. But I noticed that it was the woman who had brought me to this. Now, remember what I'm saying. Never let anything that I'm saying go above your head. Everything is going to have meaning. I keep repeating this. Y'all think that I may be doing too much, but I'm not, because all this is extremely important. But she introduced me to a higher spiritual plane. And it was just amazing. And later on, as I got more immersed, or I got deeply immersed in my spiritual awakening or reawakening, and I knew who Dr. Delbert Blair was, I could only go back and revisit that memory and just be in awe, complete and utter awe. Not to mention the fact that he's one of those people who understands the power of the Black woman, right? And then to actually, for me to actually go through the process of experiencing that concept live and direct, where the woman introduces you to higher energy. And isn't that always the case? Remember what we detailed in the Carbon Baby, where we talked about there is no other woman on this planet, no other being on this planet, first and foremost, that is more spiritual than the Black woman. Because see, we know that the woman is who educates you first, is the one who has the responsibility of nurturing you. Okay? And when you're under the tutelage of a Black woman, you're really under the tutelage of a priestess, because the first concept she introduces you, the first thing that she wants to teach you about when she's in her right state. Now, mind you, things have dramatically changed now, but we're talking about traditionally speaking. When she's in her right state, she introduces you to God. Now, we know that obviously they have changed what the concept of God is over time, and many gods exist because of this, because of them taking over our spiritual networks. But for the most part, she introduces you to it. She gets you started. She cultivates this connection with the divine being inside of you. That's what she does. That's her responsibility. So why I'm saying that, I'm saying all that to say this, is that many times when we look at the state of the Black family, and we know that unity is needed, it's paramount. But understand this, that for everything that is being done, because hindsight is 2020, when we're looking at it now, we're like, oh, well, yeah, the father needs to be there. And he does. He definitely does need to be there. But we have to also look at the fact that even though this negative and evil and insidious and dark energy has a plan and an agenda, so does Mother Nature. And even though the father was not there, we are being raised under the principal energy, the feminine energy, to connect us to the divine energy. She is the reflection of Mother Nature. So while we sit back and be like, oh, we're at a loss, reality, we have to take a look at all the pros and cons. And we have to realize that we are under their tutelage because they are there to reconnect us with the divine energy. Because we forget that. And Mother Nature is trying to make us realize that this is why I have participated in this and to this degree, to let you know, or to allow something to happen to this degree, to let you know where the real energy lies. Where the real energy lies. Because if there is no Black woman, there is no power. No Black women, no power. Okay? That's what you have to understand. Now, I'm going to start this off with the story. There's so much information to cover, but this is going to be extremely deep. Like I said, get your pad and your pencils out, whatever, take some notes, sit back, relax. Whatever you do to relax or whatever you do to unwind, go ahead and do it, because this is going to be extremely powerful. Like we said before, when we take a look at and stroll through and navigate through the so-called conscious community within these YouTube streets, what we see is utter confusion, mainly because we have people who have not done their due diligence in regards to digging deep. So what we're going to do is clear up some things so that you guys know exactly what's going on. So when you frequent people's channels, you have an idea. They're not just going to be able to throw out concepts and just get away with that, and then your mind is blown, because maybe you don't, like some people, we don't have the time to do the research, right? So we do rely on these new age teachers, okay? But the reality of it is we still have to hold their feet to the fire. Hold my feet to the fire. I get a kick out. Look, I have people who send me emails and they keep me grinding, because I know I have an insatiable hunger for new knowledge. So I love the FOF squad. I get emails all the time from very powerful minds, and they keep me sharp. I can never let this mind stay still. It won't stay still anyways. But let's move on. So the fact of the matter is that When we take a look at these people, when we talked about the conflicts that have arisen from some people who have large followings like Rashad Jamal and Young Pharaoh beefing with each other, and Rod Hayes and ISIS, or whoever these, whoever people listen to, right? Consistently, there's been this rift. And why is it these rifts? Okay, we're going to go deep off into that, and we're going to show you, and we know this without a shadow of a doubt, this energy that we have, because it's so powerful and it can be easily used to be divisive against us because of the power, the magnitude of the power, that became the perfect weapon for the so-called European. But you're about to see, we're about to reconstruct history in a way in which you have never seen it before. Guaranteed. If I just present, like Bobby Emmett said, if I just present information to you, if it is information that you're already aware of, it has to be conceptualized in a different way so that you understand exactly what was going on. All right. Or I bring you new information that you've never heard of before. Because to sit up here and give you things that you can't use, if the information has no utility, then I'm just wasting your time. And we don't want to do that. Not at all. We understand how important your time is. But you're about to see history in a whole new light. Remember, like we said, we are pushing forth an effort to redefine ourselves as well as redefine our opposition so that we can bring forth a new earth. Okay, now the thing is when we take a look at, now we're going to start off with this story. Let's get into it. Let's get into some things, right? And now remind you, every story that I tell you, it will circle back into the grand scheme of things. Some I have articles, but some articles are too extensive to read, so I'll summarize them, right? And I'll give you names, I'll spell them out so you can take them down. This is all about notes. Let's go. There's a tribe that was called the Wampanoag, 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 okay? They were also organized with other tribes like the Narragansett, N-A-R-R-A-N-G, N-A-R-R-A-G-A-N-S-E-T-T, Narragansett. Okay, then you had other tribes like the Nipmuc, N-I-P-M-U-C-K, and the Pocumtuck, P-O-C-U-N-T-U-C-K, Pocumtuck. All right, so the Nipmuc, the Pocumtuck, the Wampanoag, and the Narragansett tribes had to develop organize themselves because of the assault that they were undergoing, because the English then began to militarize, okay, against them. What am I talking about? I'm talking about 1621, which is the date of the so-called Thanksgiving. All right, 22 years after that, in 1643, this is when the English began to organize against the so-called indigenous, or so-called Indians, or the indigenous of the land, because they wanted to expand. They had no intention. See, this Thanksgiving, we already know this, but we're going to see it in a different light. I'm telling you, walk with me now, because I'm going there. Okay, now the Wampanoag had a leader by the name of Massasoit, M-A-S-S-O-S-S-O-I-T. So M-A-S-S-A-S-S-O-I-T. So M-A-S-S-A-S-S-O-I-T, Massasoit. Massasoit ends up dying in 1661. All right, he had two sons, one by the name of Wamsutta, W-A-M-S-U-T-T-A, and Metacom, M-E-T-A-C-O-M. So Wamsutta and Metacom. Now, according to their history, the Wampanoag would change their names to English names. Okay? So when Massasoit dies, his oldest son, Wamsutta, changes his name to Alexander. Now, what's interesting, in 1675, what did I say? 1675. And this name that how they've characterized it is insane. But follow me. This is how they characterize this set of events. A Christian Indian by the name of John Sassamon, S-A-S-S-A-M-O-N, Sassamon, had told the English that the indigenous were coming to raid their forts or raid their settlement, and they needed to be prepared. They found John Sassamon in an icy river, dead. Okay? So the English become enraged, and they end up hanging 3 people. And they have Wamsuta, or Alexander, which is Massasoit's oldest son, in custody. He ends up dying in custody. And so the youngest brother then takes the lead, takes power, Metacom, and he changes his name to King Philip. So the very first war, according to these English individuals or these Europeans, which was the massive war, because we know that there were other skirmishes, but the biggest war, when you had other tribes coming together to fight against the English, all right, was called King Philip's War in 1675. King Philip's War in 1675. All right. So we know that this was spurred on because the 1621 was the Mayflower. All right. Now they tell you that the first settlement in the United States was Jamestown in 1607. What did I say? 16. Because see, this is important. Like Henry Clark told us, he said, these dates will allow you to bring forth clarity. This is important. So 1607 is Jamestown, Virginia. So if you were in class and you were in remember, because to the victors, they get to write history, right? So if you were in class, you would automatically say, well, they said, where was the first settlement in the United States? Everybody would raise their hand and say Jamestown, which was 1607. And you would be wrong. And you would be wrong. So we're going to bring up an article. We're going to read some things, but I'm laying the groundwork because what I want you guys to understand is that these indigenous people were always at war with them. There was no Thanksgiving. These individuals came off this boat sick. And I'm going to show you the proof. Like I said, I have the receipts. And not just sick like you think sick. This is finna get wild. So what you have to understand, like we told you, the West was controlled by the indigenous. We already know that. And we know that later on as they're fighting, the French had a vast empire in the New World. Remember, Louisiana was a territory. Okay, a territory which included 14 and 15 or 15 states. Not only that, Napoleon's brother, John Napoleon Bonaparte, was king of Spain from 1808 to 1813. All right, which meant that they ruled. France controlled the territory of Spain, controlled Spain's territory, which was East and West Florida. So the French not only controlled the Louisiana territory, they also controlled East and West Florida. So when Napoleon ended up selling Louisiana to the United States in 1803, that did not clear up the boundaries as much as when the Adams-Honest Treaty of 1819, when Spain had sold East and West Florida to the United States. That helped to clear it up because that was also part of France's territory. Okay, we're gonna, just like I said, watch how we put all of this together. Nobody's gonna get lost here. All right, because we're going to read some articles in order, to substantiate all these things so you can clear up American history. But what you need to understand at this point in time is that the wars that were going on, look now, visualize this, because our fault is that we have an anachronistic mindset where we look at the United States as it is now and superimpose it upon history. And we then look at history like the United States looks now. No, it wasn't. Uncharted territory, vast wilderness is what it was. And when these Europeans came, they were making agreements, but yet it still was not recognized by the indigenous as well. So even when you guys say, oh, well, yeah, they had treaties and they broke them, even we did not honor their treaties because we did not trust them. Why would you honor a treaty with someone you do not trust? And we're going to read the articles. Because remember, the longest war in the United States history were the Gullah Wars, which did not end, according to them, around sometime by 1858, starting in the early 1800s. Remember, the Civil War was in 1861 through 1865. So remember, like we talked about in the book, you have a central part of America controlled by the French Empire. The West was controlled by the indigenous. Okay, East and West Florida went from being controlled by Spain to the British, back to Spain, then to the United States. Then you had these very 13 small colonies. Okay? Where was slavery? Soon as they stepped on the land, they were at war. And you have to remember the people that they sent were sick, like zombie sick. Not just regular sick, zombie sick. Oh, we're about to blow the doors off of some stuff. Not just sick, zombie sick. Okay, you're about to, like we said, we're about to redefine it. So let's read a couple articles right quick, just so that I can get you guys very familiar with what's going on right here. Okay? Very familiar with what's going on right here. Now, this article is entitled, it's from Grunge, The Real Reason the United States Acquired Florida from Spain, by Sarah Crocker. It was updated February 12th, 2022, by Sarah Crocker, The Real Reason the United States Acquired Florida from Spain. All right, let's read. By the early 19th century, the United States of America was still a brand new nation. Spain, by contrast, was a kingdom with quite a few centuries under its belt, with an array of territories and other interests around the globe, particularly the territories of New Spain that were situated just to the south of the upstart new nation. Why then would such a seemingly powerful global force as Spain hand over a significant piece of its lands? The Florida Territory to the U.S. in 1819. As it turns out, the story of Florida's history is a pretty complicated one. Ever since Spanish explorers first started trying to lay claim to it in the early 16th century, it had been the subject of seemingly endless fights over just who was supposed to be in charge of the peninsula. It was potentially strategic. With access to the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico, as well as the Caribbean to the south, everyone, it seems, was willing to fight over it. So why did Spain give it up? Pause. This is what you have to understand. When we see these world wars, remember, World War I was not the first world war, because remember, they only consider European powers to be world powers. Think about it even now. Russia and Ukraine and stuff, and if the United States gets involved, the Western power block. So anytime that they go to war, it's all about them. Remember World War I, the players that were involved. When Europe goes to war, they want the world to say, look, we're at war. So you have to go back to the formation of the new world and understand that all the very same players are involved, and they are fighting over the indigenous population and its resources. It's a world war going on. The French and the Indian War, the Civil War, the Gullah Wars. It just keeps going on and on. They're always fighting. The French was fighting the British was fighting the colonists. They were at war with each other, similar to what you see now. This is deep. We're reframing history right here. Or reinterpreting it so that obviously it makes complete sense. Because remember, do not deal with compartmentalized thought. It will have you in a hole every time. Yet the actual land itself was rural, already inhabited by indigenous people who were suspicious of European settlers and subject to intense heat and humidity. Why would the United States want it? Now, mind you, look at the rhetoric too, United States. There was no such thing as the United States at this time. But look what they say. This is how they're slicks. This is how psychologically they get you to superimpose your current idea of what the United States is now to history. So you keep visualizing the United States because they keep using the term the United States. But there was no such thing as the United States. Check. Anyway, here is the real reason the United States acquired Florida from Spain. Practically since the moment Juan Ponce de Leon had claimed Florida for Spain in 1513, the lands in question were under dispute by just about everyone. According to Britannica, Leon returned to the area in 1521, having realized that Florida was not just another Caribbean island and, in fact, could be a valuable entry point for Spain into the rest of North America. He was supposed to set up a colony, but was rather quickly wounded by local Calusa people and later died. Various attempts to establish that all-important settlement would follow, but none would really be successful for decades. So it's this war. Wars with the indigenous and all these other colonists or so-called Europeans coming in trying to settle, not settle, but to get in this land and devastate. Because remember what we know from what we told you, the book by Bartolomé de las Casas. Okay, the destruction of the West Indies, how millions of the indigenous were killed due to disease. So think about this. Let's stop and pause for a moment. If you or I took 100 people to China right now, and we said that these were our slaves, and we came to China and we got a war with China's military, as well as war with the environment, as well as war with our slaves, how viable or how stable would the institution of slavery be for us? How can we enslave somebody when we're at war with the country we're going to? I'm here to wake your ass up. Let's continue to keep going. The major players over the course of Florida's contentious history included France, Spain, Britain, and eventually the newly formed United States of America. Britain also raided the area occasionally, including one attack conducted by the notorious privateer Sir Francis Drake in 1586, according to the Florida Historical Quarterly. All of this often violent back and forth went on for centuries. Even though many acknowledge that Florida was still mostly wild, already inhabited by indigenous people who were not fans of the colonizers and subject to hot temperatures and intense weather patterns. Florida was a Spanish colony by 1565. The first Spanish period, as it is called, didn't begin until the establishment of St. Augustine on the Atlantic coast of Florida in 1565. According to JSTOR Daily, that's when Pedro Menendez de Aviles finally succeeded where so many others before him failed. He got Europeans to settle in Florida. The group, which included an estimated 70 men, 100 women, and 150 children who were left in St. Augustine when everyone else sailed off, initially grappled with a harsh environment and isolation. However, the city persisted and has since become the oldest European-founded, continuously settled city in the United States. So once again, Jamestown was not the oldest settlement by Europeans. It's the oldest English settlement. Notice how they play on words. The oldest European settlement is in Florida. Oh man, I'm kicking y'all ass. And they had more children than adults. So this idea of, oh, we had slaves in Florida, we were trying to get back. Who the children were? The children had these slaves that they were trying. Man, y'all better stop letting them lie to you. You better stop. As you see it, 70 men, 100 women, and 150 children. Understand that these individuals who are being sent to this land, it wasn't about settlement. They were the diseased ones. Most of them didn't even make it there. And when they were there, they were let loose with their plagues in order to kill off the indigenous, because the first form of warfare, you must understand, was biological and chemical warfare. And what has changed to this day? This is what you need to know. And so let's continue to keep reading, because we just getting, this is about to get deep. All of these colonial maneuvers came about because Spain was nervous about French explorers moving in on the region. As per history, Menendez was sent alone because pesky French Protestants were on the region. It said pesky French Protestants were starting to settle there, who were even going so far as to establish Fort Caroline near modern-day Jacksonville on the Atlantic coast. The majority Catholic Spanish didn't like the religious competition, but also were leery of unfriendly settlers who might have an eye on their territory, not to mention the loaded Spanish treasure ships sailing nearby. Okay? So I just want to make sure that I give you guys the most important points. Because of the French and Indian War. Now, remind you, the French and Indian War is not the French going against the Indians. It's the French warring with the Indians against the British. But notice the power of how they word this shit. And we're finna, mind you, everything that I'm saying, commit to memory. Very powerful concepts that are about to be exposed in this segment. Because remember when I told you the Narragansett, the Wampanoag, the Nipmuc, and the Pocumtuck had banded together? They had fought against the English, but the English had who on their side? They had the Mohegans, not Mohicans, but Mohegans, Mohegans, Mohegans. And the Mohawks, Indians, fought against the Narragansett, the Wampanoag, and the Nipmuc and the Pocumtuck. They fought against them. Okay? And why is it so easy to do this? Because you have to understand, which I'm going to prove it out of shadow of a doubt, what would cause us to fight against each other like this? Because see, we sit up here and we're at a loss. We're like, how was the Indians or the indigenous, our people, fighting against each other with such rage as we do now? The woman was the center of it. Notice that is the theme in all myths. If you look at Helen in the Greek mythology, in the Trojan horse, Helen started a whole war. Okay? When you look at Pocahontas, the capture of her, because it wasn't no love story, it started a whole war. Even right now to this day, if you go into a country dominated by Islam, the way that they treat women, if you run into a mosque and say, you know the woman is God, they will hang you from the highest tree. If you go into China, where in India, where they still conduct exercises in fratricide, killing off women to maintain a high level of the male population, and you tell them, you know the woman is God, they will hang you from the highest tree. If you go to anyone who's supposedly a Christian and tell them, you know the woman is God, they will hang you from the highest tree. But we about to show you the reason why, because remember I told you about, we about to bounce back and forth, but remember we about to make it all make sense. Remember we told you the exoteric reasons as to why Haiti went under or undergoes this constant assault and barrage of this barrage campaign by Western powers, specifically the United States of America, because we know that earthquakes create gold instantaneously. But the esoteric reason is about to be divulged, because we know that Haitian Vodou or voodoo existed. All right, we about to go off into the Orishas. We about this list, man. So you're going to understand that the woman is the center of it all. No black woman, no power. No black women, you know power. Okay, but let's finish this up before we go off into a tangent. Or explore other areas or bodies of knowledge at this point in time, but make it all make sense. We're going to connect the dots, right? To get these territories back, Spain had to do some maneuvering. As the National Park Service reports, the first Treaty of Paris that ended the war in 1763 gave Florida to Britain in exchange for these more lucrative lands. As a result, most Spanish colonists in Florida left for Cuba. Okay, remember 1763 is also called the Proclamation Line of 1763, which didn't allow the colonists to move westward to protect those Indian lands, the indigenous. It was our shit. The new governors of the territory set about dividing it into East and West Florida, which included parts of what is now Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. So remember what I told you before, when Napoleon had sold Louisiana to the United States by 1803, because you had the Haitian Revolution, which was not 1 year. Everybody like, the Haiti won their independence in 1804. No, the Haitian Revolution stretched from 1791 to 1804. So approximately 13 years that went on. You know how long you warring with a motherfucker? And we know that it even goes back further than that. But what they document for us and tell us to commit to memory is 1791 to 1804. But as I showed you, the Adams-Honest Treaty clears this all up. So when Spain had sold the Florida to the United States, it cleared it up because we know that East and West Florida contain parts of Louisiana. Okay? During the American Revolution, Florida even became something of a haven for loyalists who wanted nothing to do with the war. In 1783, the Peace of Paris Agreement gave Florida back to Spain, in part because Britain had lost the American Revolution. So see this world war, what you see was the world war or the world powers at the time fighting for centuries. And they highlight World War I, World War II. Man, when this new world was kicking off, there was all them fighting over you and your resources. And I'm going to show you why you're important. Because no black woman, no power. No black women, you know power. Okay. Eventually, Muskogee and Creek people from around Georgia began to migrate south in the Florida territory, according to the Florida Department of State. It took until the 1770s for this group of indigenous people from a variety of tribes to become collectively known as the Seminole, which roughly translates to runaway in reference to their origins. Now notice how slick the so-called European is when he's trying to confuse you about who the indigenous were. The Seminole, however, did not consist entirely of native people searching for new places to settle. Beginning in the early 1700s, they were joined by an increasing number of runaway slaves who came to be known as Black Seminoles. Pause. We've already heard, go back and research how many people came on the ships in Jamestown. I just told you how many people actually settled in Florida with these Europeans. More children than adults. And then they'll say, we have some slaves with us. So you saying these slaves gonna listen to children? See, what they want you to do is think they had you shipping you off on these ships across the Atlantic. When they are outnumbered, they're outnumbered globally now. So you know they were heavily outnumbered in these settlements. This is ridiculous. Only thing that they did was they were able to distract you in the most vile means, obviously, because you couldn't avoid this distraction if you got people coming here walking around like zombies, literally dying as soon as they touch the land, spreading disease. And then capturing your women and then saying another tribe is responsible for that. That's what they did. They would kidnap. That was their slavery. They would kidnap your women, rape them, beat them, and then tell another tribe, oh, the Wampanoag is responsible for that. And let someone kidnap your mother or your sister. You're going to war. It's the same thing we do here in these streets. Somebody touches your sister, somebody touches your auntie or your mother, you're going to war. That's how they did it. Oh, I'm kicking ass today. I'm kicking ass and I ain't even taking names because I don't need to know your name. The Seminole, however, like we said, and then talked about Black Seminoles, Florida was especially attracted to Black people fleeing enslavement. Oh my God, let's go. Let's get it in. Florida was especially attractive to Black people fleeing enslavement, as Spain had abolished slavery there in 1693. So this whole Harriet Tubman story, oh, it's cute. But why would you run north when you only got to go to Florida for freedom? Why would you run north if you only have to go to Florida for freedom? If there was a such thing as slavery as a massive and all-encompassing institution. Check. For people living in the southern British colonies such as Georgia, it could be a relatively short trip over the border to freedom. Remember, Georgia was named after King George. George is another name for Zeus. Oh, everything that we've learned, you're going to hear a little bit of it in this segment. This is going to be one of the most powerful segments ever by the FOF squad. It could be a relatively short trip over the border to freedom. Eventually it became clear that the U.S. wanted to claim Florida in part to appease Georgia landowners who wanted to cut off this escape route. So, they mix the truth with a little bit of fiction. But we're here to get the facts because we have reading comprehension, because we understand what? If you cannot understand what you have read, then you cannot read. Now check. Remember I said, so now I had the dates in my head, but now we're going to confirm what I have said. I'm testing myself because I am giving you the receipts here. The first Seminole War, 1817 through 1818, somewhere in 1817, 1818 it says. So you guys, hold on, sorry about that. So you know what I'm reading. Okay, check. Andrew Jackson attempted to recapture runaway slaves living amongst the Seminoles, according to the Seminole Nation Museum. The action was also taken in retaliation for early Seminole attacks on American settlers, which had been egged on by none other than the Spanish territorial government. Jackson's forces entered the territory and attacked Seminole outposts, pushing the tribe further south into the peninsula. The events of this war pushed Spain to finally hand over Florida to the United States. It was followed by a second Seminole War, 1835 to 1842, and a third Seminole War, 1855 to 1858, both of which generally focused on land disputes between the U.S. and the tribe, as well as the more or less forced migration of tribal members from Florida and into reservations into Oklahoma's Indian Territory, per Legends of America. Some were at least allowed to remain on unsanctioned reservation in southern Florida, while others continued to live for a time in the depths of the least developed areas like the Everglades swamps. So I'm telling you, so now we know that the Oklahoma Trail of Tears, when you hear Blanco say, my ancestors on the Oklahoma Trail of Tears, okay, were they this color? Because we've already established that the Seminoles, that they claim, the indigenous, began to mix in with the black Seminoles. And if you know nothing else, you don't have to be a geneticist, a fake scientist, to know that when black people have babies with anybody on this planet, them babies turn out black. Especially if they're living in a region, as articulated by this article, where it is extremely hot, subtropical temperatures. So if you have any melanin to speak of, and it's hot all the fucking time, what color do you think these people were? And because our culture is so powerful even to this day, how do you think these people acted? Like us. Like everybody in the world tries to act like now. So look at what reading comprehension has been able to give to us. So now we're going to put the nail in the coffin. And then also we've been able to substantiate that that was the longest running war in United States history. Started off in around 1817, didn't end to approximately 1858. So you got a 40-year war going on. Now remember, 3 years later, you have the Civil War. See, they glorify that because this is what they want to tell you, which was the highlight. This is what, and how many soldiers and European lives were lost in the Civil War. Nah, it was the Gullah Wars which was fucking y'all up. And you wouldn't have no United States of America had not Napoleon sold you Louisiana. And see, it's almost like, when you think about it in retrospect, because remember, hindsight is 20/20. It's almost like it hurt us more for the Haitian Revolution to have been successful than for it to, if it hadn't worked out. Because had not Haiti won their revolution, much of America would still be the French Empire. There would be no United States of America. They had to sell it because Napoleon was still fighting the English over in his countries, over in the so-called continent of Europe, which he lost at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. Okay, this is why he had to sell it. He needed the money. So what you have to understand is, now this is finna rock your world. But first, before we get into rocking your world and blowing your mind about, knowing no black woman, no power, knowing black woman, you know power, let's show you exactly how they came across. Okay, how these Europeans came across. Now, this is visual evidence. This is an oak statue of Saint Sebastian who was invoked against the plague in the Middle Ages, 1520 to 1530. Take a look at this statue. See him hung on a tree or stuck to it, tied to a tree with arrows in him. Arrows in him, because they look at his body. Obviously, he's skin and bones. Skin and bones, disease, zombie-like. Look at his arms and how they are. Look at the arrows all through them, how many arrows that our indigenous people, our ancestors had to put into these disease-walking individuals just to stop them. This was biological and chemical warfare at its finest. It wasn't even a penal colony. You guys they even tell you, oh, well, yeah, this is where we sent the criminals. No, this is where they sent the disease. They sent the disease from their plagues and dropped them off. This is how we were dropping like flies. We seen them coming. They are all diseased. They're ragged. They got sores all on their body. And they would just drop. Some of them would drop dead. But they would be dropping dead right within your settlements, on your land. And your people will come into contact with these infectious agents and drop like flies. Oh, you think we ain't got the receipts? The Bubonic Plague, the first pandemic, published the 25th of April, 2019 by the Science Museum. Oh, I'm kicking so much ass, it's about to be ridiculous. And I got to speed this up because I don't even know if I got enough time to give you guys all this information. But let's go. Let's do our best to get all of this out here. The impact of the bubonic plague epidemics of the past still echo across the centuries, reminding us of the devastation that disease can inflict on communities. The Roman physician Galen coined the term plague to describe any quickly spreading fatal disease. Epidemics of all kinds have been described as plagues, but the bubonic plague is a very specific disease that first spread around the world in the 1300s. Okay? Plague epidemics hit the world in 3 waves. The 1300s to the 1900s. Now, what did it say? The 1300s to the 1900s. So all this time of exploration, and you looking in the exploration era is romanticized by Europeans. They're on their voyages, all dressed in this gear and their strong seafaring capabilities, and you're like, oh, look at the European. Look how they're just conquering. No, they're sending their diseased, ill-gotten agents to these lands specifically and for the end result to be death and the spread of these plagues. And killed millions of people. The first wave, called the Black Death in Europe, was from 1347 to 1351. The second wave in the 1500s saw the emergence of a new virulent strain of the disease. So what did it say, the 1500s? What was the first settlement? In the 1500s over in Florida. But was it a settlement or was it an act of war? Through biological and chemical warfare. The last pandemic at the end of the 1800s spread across Asia and at last gave scientific medicine the opportunity to identify the cause of the disease and its means of transmission. But since we know that there is no such thing as a Blanco science and no such thing as a Blanco scientist, we know that that was not the case. They had no intention of curing anything because it was a weapon. And we all know what these Blancos do when they find something out about something, they turn it into a weapon. So check. So now we know. Now let's go off into something a little bit more profound. The esoteric reason as to why Haiti is suffering now to this day is cursed. Okay. So you have a lot of people talking about the Orishas. All right. Which is from the Yoruba religion. Okay. Now, the Yoruba religion, which is centered over in West Africa, but it started around somewhere between 500 to 300 BC. Okay, but we should be careful about committing that to memory as well, because there are still a lot of areas in West Africa that have not been unexcavated. Okay, so we have to be very careful about that, right? So as far as archaeological evidence has been able to provide, they state somewhere between 500 to 300 BC. And then, like what I said before, with the way that time is structured through these many different versions of timekeeping, right? Through what we had talked about. We talked about the base 60, which is math based on the number 60. We know that we use a combination of a lot of different math systems, okay? We primarily, they say, use the Hindu-Arabic system, right? But we know that base 60 is extremely important because we use base 60 or the number 60 for time, angles, and geographical coordinates, okay? But you also use the decimal system, which is 0 through 9. All right, you use the binary system for your computers, etc. So you go off into that, so we understand that, right? So what we begin to understand is that we just can't really go off of those things and take it. We have to continue to keep doing digging. But as for right now, 500 to 300 BC over in West Africa, it is a Yoruba religion, all right, in West Africa. And the Orishas were mainly what's typically referred to as spirits, okay? The supreme deity or the divine creator was Olodumare, Olodmare, Olodumare. Okay, and Olodumare was so immense and his power was so vast that it was beyond human comprehension. So what he did was split himself up into these different different avatars, if you will, different aspects of his divine energy or her divine energy or its divine energy, right? And then when the energy was in the air, then different orishas or spirits would take up randomly whatever they were able to catch. That's what they would have. That's the sphere of influence that they would be responsible for. Okay, there's 7 main ones in the orishas, but then obviously there's many more depending upon what oral tradition you subscribe to. Because you also have the Vodou, okay, or Haitian Vodou as it's known, but the Vodou, which is also in the languages in western part of Africa in places like Benin, Togo, Ghana, Nigeria. It means spirits. Okay? And the principal deity in Vodou is Mawa or Mahu. M-A-W-H-U or M-A-H-U. Mahu or Mawu. All right? And Mahu is a feminine principle, a female divine entity. And in some oral traditions, she had 7 children herself too as well. Okay? She had Sakpata. Sakpata was the Vodou of the earth. Exabiosis, X-E-B-I-S-I-O-S. Exabiosis was the Vodou of thunder and divine judgment. Then you had Agbe. Agbe, A-G-B-E, was the Vodou of the sea. Then you had Gu, G-U. Gu was the Vodou of iron and war. Then you had Agi, A-G-E. Agi was the Vodou of forest and agriculture. Then you had Jo, J-O. Jo was the Vodou of air. And then you had Legba, which you're probably familiar with, who was the Vodou of unpredictability. Okay, then other oral traditions, you got Azuke. Azuke was the Vodou also of agriculture. Azuka, I believe. Yes, Azuka. All right. And then you have other ones. And then I know the one that you're really familiar with is Ogun, which was the Vodou of war and defense. Okay. So Mahu, Legba was the chief deity, her youngest son, but the chief deity. And you couldn't get to the other spirits or Vodouns without passing through Legba. Okay? And then she also had an androgynous son called Dan, who was this rainbow serpent who accompanied her. Because also the belief system was that the dead and the living lived amongst each other. Okay? But with just this plane obviously was guarded by these spirits. All right? And then, so Legba also is seen as has like 2 characteristics mainly. One is an old man to denote wisdom, and also obviously sexual vigor because he has a large phallus. Okay? And then he's also seen as a child, which characterizes his rebelliousness and also his humility. All right? And so you have to, you understand those are the concepts coming from, these entities. But you really, what we're trying to get you to grasp is that the divine power is the female entity. Okay, so voodoo, the reason why it's seen as negative and evil all the time is because its main divine entity or this divine and supreme power is a female. Okay, matter of fact, it's usually, they feel like in traditions, like it's passed down through the female bloodline, and each Each spirit contains a female priesthood. Okay, this is where you get the concept of fetishes. Fetishes are statues or dried animal and human remains that are intended to invoke some sort of power from the entity you call on alongside your shrines, right? In order for rejuvenation or whatever whatever power you're trying to get from whatever entity it is that you're calling upon. Okay, so this is the religion of the Haitians. This is the religion in Louisiana. Okay? Notice that the French are the ones who maintain a monopoly on Egyptology. So the most powerful people of the time, whether you fast forward to the Germans and Hitler, they're getting all this power, this esoteric power, from going and doing what? Capturing your energy. Getting your shrines and getting your statues and getting digging up. That's why they go into a frenzy with this archaeological shit. Remember, they can say we don't have an opportunity to even take the lead in that regard. They won't allow us to even get our own shit back. Okay, specifically for this reason. So you have to understand that the female entity or the divine power was seen as a female entity, respectively. And this is where it gets deep. As I said, no black woman, no power. No black women, no power. Why is this so important? It's because, think about it. Haiti won their independence. On the history books, supposedly they are the first ones to gain independence from European powers. And they use a black woman as a god to do it. Yet you sit amongst those who serve a male God and you can't get freedom yet. Ain't that something? We all know that most of our power comes from our women. They don't hold you up. You hear it now with black men. Oh, black women too aggressive. They act too aggressive. They not docile because they're warriors inside. They are the reflection of the ultimate deity. They're trying to get you to catch up. Who you think led these wars? Who you think we were warring for? Haiti already proves that. It's the evidence cannot be contested. Now think how deep that is. You end up warring with these Europeans and winning when you accept your God as the black woman, but then you end up losing against the European when you accept your God as a male. I am killing you niggas. No black woman, no power. When you know black women, you know power. So, in essence, what we have learned is we're reconstructing. Oh, I feel so good about rocking and rolling. I'm in this ring just dropping blows, dropping bombs on these motherfuckers, right? So that kind of sums up that, right? Just an overview. It's more complex than that. We cannot sit up here and try to simplify because that's an oversimplification of something that is extremely complex, but you get the gist of it, right? What's going on. That even in Louisiana, you see these, right? And since we know that they weren't transporting these individuals, even though we know that the hub and the centers of these religious outlooks were in these regions in West Africa, we know that we had great seafaring capabilities, that we had no problem engaging with one another. Just as blacks don't do, we go wherever it's popping at, don't we? And we acknowledge where our centers is at. Just like recently, we know Atlanta, that's where, especially back in the day when you had Freaknik and all that different stuff, that was where black people wanted to go. We're like, oh, it's popping over there. We had no problem engaging and appreciating our culture wherever it was at. Okay? But know that in these regions where they had the most trouble, it was when they accepted the supreme deity as a female. And then understand this is why they get so much angst, because every other culture is accepting the Most High as a male deity. That's why you see esoterically Haiti goes through so much, because they still have the remnants of that spiritual energy that recognizes it as a female entity. And this is where you get what's called syncretic religions, or that's where or synchronizing is where the word that should pop up and be familiar to you. A syncretic religion is when you have two belief systems that merge as one. So when Catholicism was spread specifically by the Spanish, they had what was called saints and angels. And these saints and angels represented intermediaries between the believer and the supreme deity. So that's why it was an easy religion for our people to take on after a while, after years and years of battles. Mind you, like we said, and what was documented in these reports, was that these wars went on for centuries. This wasn't no easy work, but they had to send their sick in. Remind you, on most of these manifestos off these ships, there were more children than adults. So you're going to tell me that this so-called European was so supreme, he had children running his slavery institutions? I am here to wake your ass up. Now, let's continue to move on. Let's continue to move on. Because we have to show without a shadow of a doubt that this is what's going on. Now, you have a brother out there, what is his, because I forget his name from time to time, but let's see if I have him in my history. Let's see, watch later. Let's see if I got him in here. Let's see. Give me a second. I hope we do. We hope it's being done. This is being done justice, because I'm always making an effort to show the Most High that I appreciate the gifts that she's given me, and I want to make sure that you guys understand that too as well. But let's see. Let me go back for a second. Let me go back. Just give me 1 second, because I want to get his name right. Because the brother does do phenomenal work. He does do phenomenal work. So we got to recognize his brother, because that's what I'm all about. I would rather my people be listening to people like this, no matter, even because you're not going to agree with everything everybody says, right? You're just not. But I think that it's important that we surround ourselves with these type of people, regardless if you totally agree with Rod, or if you totally agree with Jamal, or you totally agree. I think, some people have just went way off their rocker, and they may be at the point of no return. But hopefully they come back. Hopefully they fully awaken. That's what we really pray for. We pray for the young pharaohs and all that different stuff to get them reacquainted. Because when I criticize, remember, I'm criticizing the information. I don't come after them. I tell you, I'm talking about what you know. We have to be careful of the information we are giving to our people, because we will be held responsible. We will be held responsible. Okay. But let's see. Be patient, people. I'm almost there. Trying to figure out. I think I have somewhere in this library. Because I want to get his name right. Because we're going to highlight this. We're going to show you that the divisive energy is real. Okay? And the only thing that I ask, like I said before, only thing I ask of my people is, when people present information to you, just go back and do your research on them. Just go back and do your research on what they said. Doesn't take away from what, maybe it gets them to be a little bit more aggressive in their approach in terms of giving you the correct information. That's exactly what it's all about. It's just not about trying to put a wedge between you and them, or drive conflict. It's just stating that we have to make sure that they know that we're going to hold your feet to the fire, because to educate the chosen ones is a huge responsibility, and you will be judged for what you do. And when we see people acting out and they look like they care more about the money than actually getting our people, or awakening our people out of the artificial matrix, then they will be judged. Your feet will be held to the fire in that regard. And the Most High is going to send out people like me in order to make sure that shit happens, right? Because I don't fear nan one of nobody. shit, you better understand that. I don't care what type of threats people make. I don't care what they say. I don't care that my platform is smaller than them. It just is what it is. We're going to continue to keep doing what we're doing. So let me see. Come on now. It's got to be somewhere. No, it's got to be somewhere close in here, right? Because I know I try to, so many people recommend so many videos to me. But let's see. Be like Bobby Hemmett, y'all all right? Hopefully y'all all right. Just be patient with me right quick. Let's we can get to this. Maybe it didn't. Anyway, you guys may be familiar with this brother. He has these herbs and stuff. He talks about H3O2. Okay. He obviously let's see what we got here. Yeah, and so he has testimonials from our people on how effective his herbs has been, and so he's definitely, he puts a lot of emphasis on fruit and its healing properties and stuff like that, because as you know, we told you guys that what is fruit? Fruit are the ovaries of plants, right? That sexual energy. And it helps to revitalize and rejuvenate the human, especially the carbon being, with specifically of eumelanin species. So we understand that completely and totally here at the FOF squad. And then he also talks about H3O2, and I think what's important for that, important for us to understand about that is that so many people talk about it, but we know here at the FOL Squad, we have to have a complete understanding. I'm pretty sure in his videos he's done that. He's talked about how some people have taken his information and not giving him credit. But what I will do is I'm going to give you credit for bringing up a concept that I think is obviously pertinent, but we're going to dissect it even more. And if you've heard some of this information from him, I haven't taken a look at when he's broken down H3O2, but I've heard him talk about it. I heard him make a video about some individual within the community who's been gaining success off of stealing his information, but yet not giving him credit. So that's why I wanted to say his name, to give him credit and to acknowledge him, because the brother's out there doing work. But what we want to do is we want to go a little bit further to make sure that when you engage with anybody, when you're listening to someone talk, that you understand exactly what's going on and you know exactly what this stuff is. Well, H3O2, as it sounds, or as it is, it's just an extra hydrogen and oxygen atom, okay? So extra hydrogen and an extra oxygen is added. That's what gives you H3O2, all right? And so what you have is this is typically referred to as what's called structured water, all right? And the structured water, if you could explain it in this way, is what they also refer to, and what this guy, because it actually is a guy by the name of Dr. Pollack. Dr. Pollack got his biochemical engineering degree in 1968 from the University of Pennsylvania, and he published his book in 2001, which I want you guys to get in your library. It's called Cells, Gels, S-E-L-L-S, Gels, G-E-L-S, and the Engines of Life. So Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life. It was published in 2001. So way before anybody of us was talking this information, it was a Blanco scientist who, mind you, like I said, the only time they have credibility is when they're looking through things through the lens of nature. So he got this information through nature and understood that what we know as water is not even really, we can't even grasp water, because like I've told you in the book, The Carbon Baby, water's molecular formula makes it that where it's so light, it's not even supposed to be a liquid. There are molecules heavier than water, ammonia, for instance, which is still a gas, and it's heavier than water, and it's not a liquid. So they don't even know how water is even a liquid. And you talk about the three phases of water: solid, liquid, and gas, but we also know it's plasma. So it actually should be interpreted as the fifth phase, if anything, because they may consider it the fourth phase, but it's actually 5 phases of water, because water is crucial to plasma. We know that. We've already talked about that. But this fourth phase is called EZ, or the exclusion zone. but they use the letters E and Z. So it starts to structure itself because free water is loosely tied. We know water to be what's called the universal solvent. All right, so it can make these bonds. If you ever have made Kool-Aid before, you know when you put a lot of sugar in and Kool-Aid, water has already tied itself molecularly. So anything that you put more than water will let you know, because it will what? It will go to the bottom. Water has said, I'm all tied up. I can do no more. It's no longer free water. Okay, now this is the important thing, that the easy water basically, so when you take, say for instance, ice, before ice turns back to liquid, there is an intermediate period called, and it's noted as the exclusion zone, okay, where it starts to structure water. So it bonds and it becomes more viscous and it has more power. And how does it get this power? Through the absorption of light, specifically infrared light. Okay, pause. Let's go over the electromagnetic spectrum once more. Now this is deep because remember, everything that I say is going to be profound in this regard. It's just going to put everything together. You have radio waves, microwaves, infrared, visible light, UV or ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma rays. As you go up the spectrum, it goes from waves to just energy. All right, but remember, it's all one spectrum. It's just different representations or different avatars, if you will, of the same deity. Oh my God, what does that sound like? We talking Orisha again, or is we talking electromagnetic spectrum? Let's go. So what he learned, when you use a UV spectrometer, all right, which measures wavelengths, okay, this water loves infrared, or what's literally so it loves water, it loves to absorb light at around the 270 nanometer mark. Nanometers is what's used to measure light. So it loves that light right under the visible part of the electromagnetic spectrum. It absorbs it and it begins to structure the water. And it gives you power. So what he was positing in his book, because this is crucial for your understanding, was that conventional science teaches you that cells have a negative potential, right? If you measure it, you'll have negative potential. And they say that this negative electrical potential exists within the cellular membrane. But in his book, he states that in the cytoplasm also has a negative charge. So he declares that conventional science is wrong and that the water is responsible for your electrical charge, not the ions within the cellular membrane. So he's challenging Blanco science again, just like how we told you about Arnold Ehret, how he challenged Blanco science and said that their concept of physiology is all off. All right? That the heart should be seen as a valve system and not the engine. Come on, we went over that though. I encourage you to take a look at those, the previous videos to catch up to that concept, because we don't really have too much time to go off into that. So to prove, we're going to introduce, let's go off into, like we say, get more evidence. But understand, you can form structured water by sitting you yourself sitting out in the sun after you just drunk water. Or you can take some good water that you've just, gotten from the store. I actually get the reverse osmosis water or whatever, and then you got the high pH alkaline water. But you can sit it out in the sun in a glass jar, let it absorb the sun, and it will become structured water. It's going to absorb, that water is going to absorb the infrared radiation. All right, and then it will remain structured for a long time. So even if you put it in the refrigerator, cool it, it's still going to remain structured water. So let's get more of an idea of what's going on by watching this video. Okay, we went ahead and started off by 1976 Copyright Act, Section 107. Allowances made for fair use for the purposes of education, criticism, news, reporting, scholarship. But overall, here at the FOF Squad, waking your ass up. Let's get into it. Very powerful video. Very, very powerful video. Very, very powerful video. All right. Okay, we're just going to take a few minutes to look at this, but you guys need a visual, all right, to see the phenomenal power of water, what you think you know is water. Remember, just because you can name something, this is what I say in this is what I say in the book all the time. Just because you name something does not mean that you know what it is. All right, so let's go.
Thank you. Water is quite beautiful to look at, and I guess you probably all know that you're 2/3 water, but you do, don't you? Right. But you may not know that.
Pause though. I don't mean to interrupt the Blanco scientist, but this is what you have to understand. You're not 2/3 water. Why is this? Because what do we say in the book? You're only as much water as you drink. So always remember that. You're 2/3 if you're drinking adequate amounts. But if you're not drinking water on a regular basis, you are not 2/3 water. So let's always remember that. Remember, that's important for us to understand because we run around here talking about, oh, my body's mostly water. Not if you're not drinking it. But we'll allow him to continue. Let's go.
That because the water molecule is so small that 2/3 translates into 99% of your molecules. Think of it, 99% of your molecules are water. So do those, your shoes are carrying around a blob of water, essentially. Now, so the question is, in your cell, do those water molecules actually do something? Are these molecules essentially jobless, or do they do something that might be really, really interesting? And for that matter, are we even really sure that water is H2O? We read about that in the textbook, but is it possible that some water is actually not H2O? So these are questions that whose answers are actually not as simple as you think they might be. In fact, we're really in the dark about water. We know so little. Why do we know so little? Well, you probably think that water is so pervasive. It's such a simple molecule that everything ought to be known about water, right? I mean, you think it's all there. Well, scientists think the same. Many scientists think, oh, water is so simple that everything must be known. And in fact, that's not at all the case. So let me start with a few examples of things about water that we ought to know, but we really haven't a clue. So here's something that you see every day. You see a cloud in the sky, and you haven't asked the question, how does the water get there? Why? I mean, there's only one cloud sitting there, and the water is evaporating everywhere. Why does it go to this cloud, forming what you see there? So another question, could you imagine droplets floating on water? We expect droplets to coalesce instantly with the water. The droplets persist for a long time. And then here's another example of walking on water. This is a lizard from Central America, and because it walks on water, it's called the Jesus Christ lizard. And of course, you'll say, well, I know the answer to this. The surface tension is high on water, but the common idea of surface tension is that there's a single molecular layer of water at the top, and this single molecular layer is sufficient to create enough tension to hold whatever you put there. I think this is an example that doesn't fit that. And here's another example, 2 beakers of water, you put 2 electrodes in, and you put high voltage between them, and then what happens is a bridge forms, and this bridge is made of water, bridge of water, and this bridge can be sustained as you move one beaker away from the other beaker as much as 4 centimeters, sustained essentially indefinitely. How come we don't understand?
So like he was saying, he's saying that this idea of surface tension is the scientists, the way they see it, like that's what allows this lizard to walk on water. This is what that explains the droplets floating on. But like he said, really what it is this zone called the exclusion zone, and it structures the water built on light. As you see, the electrodes were put in these beakers, and then the water connected with itself and created a bridge, and then they separated the beakers, and then the water still maintained its integrity, or the bridge still maintained its integrity. See, remember what we talked about in the book, the Kansas effect. When you aim 13.56 megahertz at water, the hydrogen separates from the oxygen and you light a match and fire comes out of water. Check. Commit that to memory, because we'll go off into the movie Project Power, because like we said, if you saw it with these 2 eyes and you didn't see it with this one, you missed out entirely. But let's continue. We don't have much time, so let's let them continue.
So what I mean is that there are lots of things about water that we should understand, but we don't understand. And so we really don't know. So, okay, so what do we know about water? Well, you've learned that the water molecule contains an oxygen and two hydrogens. That you learn in the textbooks. We know that. And we also know there are many water molecules, and these water molecules are actually moving around microscopically. So we know that. What don't we know about water? Well, we don't know anything about the social behavior of water. What do I mean by social? Well, sitting at the bar and chatting with your neighbor. We don't know how water molecules actually share information or interact. And also, we don't know about the actual movements of water molecules, how water molecules interact with one another, and also how water molecules interact with other molecules like that purple one sitting there. Unknown. Also, the phases of water. Now, we've all learned that there's a solid phase, a liquid phase, and a vapor phase. However, 100 years ago, there was some idea that there might be a fourth phase somewhere in between a solid and a liquid. Sir William Hardy, a famous physical chemist, 100 years ago exactly, professed that there was actually a fourth phase of water, and this water was kind of more ordered than other kinds of water, and in fact had a gel-like consistency. So the question arose to us, all of this was forgotten because people began, as methods improved, to begin to study molecules instead of ensembles of molecules, and people forgot about the collectivity of water molecules and began looking, the same as in biology, began looking at individual molecules and lost sight of the collection. So we thought, we're going to look at this because we had some idea that it's possible that this missing link, this fourth phase, might actually be the missing link so that we can understand the phenomena regarding water that we don't understand. So we started by looking somewhere between a solid and liquid. And the first experiments that we did to get us going is we took a gel, that's the solid, and we put it next to water. And we added some particles to the water because we had the sense that the particles would show us something. And sure enough, you can see that what happened is that the particles began moving away from the interface between the gel and the water, and they just kept moving and moving and moving, and they wound up stopping at a distance that's roughly the size of one of your hairs. Now that may seem small, but by molecular dimensions, that's practically infinite. It's a huge dimension. So we began studying the properties of this zone, and we called it, for obvious reasons, the exclusion zone, because practically...
Okay, so he puts this gel in water. This is like, that's what's called this is when you do like colloidal experiments, right? And it's when you submerge a substance, usually a gel, all right, in something, and then it you do experiments based off that. But what happens is like he noticed that there was this what he called the exclusion zone, like he talked about, and molecularly it was vast, right? So basically what they're applying it to is your cytoplasm. Like this water gets inside of the cell and it creates a buffering, a structured zone, all right, where the water is more viscous and it's more active and stuff, and it's just like basically the fourth phase of water, where it is in between something solid and in between the liquid. And it's just this powerful energy, and it creates a negative charge. So that's basically the gist of it without getting all deep off into scientific terms. But we don't have much time, so I can't go, but I want you to check that video out. It's the fourth phase of water, Dr. Gerald Pollack at his TED Talks and stuff. So if you want to go deep off into looking at that in its entirety, then I suggest that you do so. So like we said before, we don't know about water, and this is what I want to in that concept on, which is that we get so caught up into aliens and outer space, which these things, like I said before, if they exist, now notice what these so-called Europeans have not told you. Remember in the movies, and they'll say this: if something is alien or not from this planet, it won't show up in the periodic table of elements. It will not show up in the periodic table of elements. Okay, that's your first indicator or first clue that it's from here. It's just on a higher level. Okay, because remember, even when you're dealing with the so-called Anunnaki or the Anunnaki, the idea that they claim from Planet Nibiru, you have to give credit to a guy called Zachariah Sitchin, okay? Chariots of the Gods. That's where people get that Planet Nibiru shit from. All right, but scientifically, the Anunnaki was seen as the Sumerians, and they used clay tablets. And even if you take a look at what he posited in his book, Zachariah Sitchin, he said that they wanted gold. Oh, well, okay, gold is on our periodic table of elements. That's not alien to Earth. So it's either one or two things that can happen. Either you have a planet just like ours, or you was from this motherfucker. Remember the movie Lucy? Check out movie Lucy. Like I said, these movies are important. She used 100% of her brain power. Now, only thing that was missing to make her alien is if she had a spaceship and talked about she came from another planet. But other than that, the same characteristics of an alien, the same idiosyncrasy. Oh, she used all the brain power. She could manipulate energy. She could turn energy to matter. All these things that we look at aliens to be so far advanced that we fear them because we know how Europeans claim how this energy operates. Those who are more advanced only enslave those who are not. Okay, so like I said, that's why we got to get our head out of the clouds, because unless they say that they got a ship, and this ship that we reverse engineered, or we said alien came out of, because remember, they claim they know less about the oceans. They know more about the moon than they do our oceans. So you get these, it's not that I don't think that spaceships and all that stuff exists, or these advanced spaceships. I just don't think that they're coming from other planets. They are advanced beings that are from here, because we can be advanced. We're not using all of our brain power. You are looking at yourself based on your limitations. Based on your limitations. So that's what you need to know. So when we are looking at ourselves based on our limitations, we're alien to ourselves. We don't even know what the fuck water is. They don't even know how the brain operates. So you're letting someone tell you about aliens, and you're alien to yourself. I'm like, my man, who is that nigga Ralph? Can I get a hello? Y'all need to understand this stuff, man. This stuff is critical. So what we want to talk when we talk about Project Power, what was so amazing about that movie was this. Okay, if you haven't seen it, please go watch it. It's still on Netflix right now. Movie with Jamie Foxx. He was this, in the Army. I believe he was a Marine or, a Navy SEAL or something. I think that's probably So they did experiments on him, with radiation and stuff. And so it really didn't work on him, but he passed it along to his seed. Okay, his daughter. And then they found out that his daughter had these abilities. All right, now remember, when they do movies, every character, every place is important. Remember, it's in Louisiana. We go back to Louisiana. What are we talking about? The Vodou now, right? We're talking about the Vodou. Look at the place to where they had this. They're letting you know of the energy. Some things you ought to already know because you've done your due diligence. Okay, so she has these abilities, and they start making drugs based off of her blood. Now, what's interesting is when two things happen. One, he's at this meeting where this guy's talking because he's trying to figure out, he kidnaps this one black girl who's dealing the drugs, right? They call power. She's dealing power. And so he captures her to get to people who are higher up on the food chain. So he goes inside this meeting, and they're talking about, he's like, oh, well, look at the animal, look at the salamander and all this. He's able, a limb gets cut off, he's able to regrow it back. Look at this animal, that animal. See how animals are able to evolve, and yet we as humans, this is the next step of our evolution, being able to do what animals do. We should be embarrassed because of the power that we have, but yet we're not utilizing it, etc. But we've already said this on this program. We've already told you that. Look at nature, and you will get the answers. Okay, so that was the first part. Then the second part goes off. He goes onto this ship called Genesis, or Genes of Isis. Notice it's in the water. It's on a ship. This is important. Why is this important? Because then his daughter is obviously on the ship, but as he goes to capture, obviously he purposely gives himself up. But his daughter, as he's on the ship, some European lady comes up to him, and she's like, oh, so she's explaining to him why they're doing what they're doing. And who does she bring up? Of all people, Henrietta Lacks. She says, are you familiar with someone named Henrietta Lacks? She said, her cells, the HeLa cells, are the foundation of every technological advancement in medicine for the last 80 years. She was just a regular woman. And if you know anything about Henrietta Lacks, she was a tobacco farmer and a housewife. loved to dance, enjoyed life, but yet had superpowers inside of her that became the foundation for medicine to this day. Her cells are studied all over the world. They are called immortal cells. They've thrown everything at these cells, and their cells cannot be destroyed. And it came from a black woman. No black woman, no power. No black women, you no power. So what happens is that in this, after she talks about Henrietta Lacks and all this different stuff, you got to see, look what they're playing. Another black woman then holds the key to power. They made a drug out of it, and people were able to have superpowers for 5 minutes. Okay, so at the end of it, what Jamie Foxx's character does is take a capsule. Because remember, they experimented with radiation in him, and he knew that when he took it, this was going to be his last and final stand. So he takes the capsule, and then he uses water to make fire. Hold up. Did the Kansas effect just come popping up again? He just starts throwing the water and turning it into fire and obliterating them. I can't even say that because they're going to think I'm bullying, but obliterating the opposition in front of him. And then obviously he collapses and he dies, but then yet she had the power, because as she's escaping off the ship with the girl that Jamie Foxx had kidnapped and then became good friends with, she pauses and rests her hand on this glass housing where it has dirt in it, and a plant rolls up. So when she's trying to resuscitate, which she successfully does, her father bring him back to life, her eyes turn green. Okay? She had the power of life in her. No black woman, no power. No black women, you know power. And then who gave life? Think about it. He was this how deep and enigmatic these symbols were in this movie. He was the father of her, gave her life, and then she returned life back to him. Like what did Cat Williams say in his special? He said the woman's pussy was the first fax machine. You put something in there and you got out a replica of you. And that's why I tell us we do so much in the patrilineal society to show you that we got power as men. That's why if you notice with the church, remember we said who's the most spiritual entity on this planet? The black woman. So when the man becomes the head of the church, he merely just becomes the head of black women. This is another way to subjugate the energy. It's just like they say we went half on the baby. No, you did not. And I use this crude, it's crude, but I think that the metaphor still applies. If you went to Lowe's for say for instance you had to build a house and you went to Lowe's and got all your building materials, all the wood, all the nails, all this different stuff, right? But then you built your house. Now, would you say Lowe's built your house? No, that's just where you got the materials. So we know when we ejaculate inside of a female, we give her the materials. Her body has to do all of the work. She has to build the house. Nigga, you're just Lowe's. That's who the fuck you are. And I'm just telling the truth. No black woman, no power. You know black women, you know power. So essentially what we're dealing with, like we said, look how powerful this movie was. All right, in terms of getting you to understand that the power is coming from black women, even when they're not aware they power themselves. That's why you got to pause on the declarations you make against our females. Henrietta Lacks was just a simple woman according to what she loved to do, but look at the immense power she had. Look at the latent energy she had inside of her. Just like you, black man, you're a god too. Look at the latent energy you have inside of you and you're not maximizing it. Look at what they're doing. We talked about hemisyncing. You have to visualize the brain, okay? Because it's just like if you're in the mirror and you're shaving or you're giving yourself a haircut or women are putting makeup on their face, it's hard to do a great job if you can't see a reflection of yourself. So it's hard to utilize the brain and visualize the brain if you don't visualize what the brain looks like as you're doing it. Imagine that pineal gland, which is in the center of your brain. Imagine the electrical waves just emanating from it. Whether it's a small pine cone you imagine or a little small unk. And just imagine electricity radiating to both hemispheres, connecting them, hemisyncing. Oh, I'm on fire. you will know who sent me before this is all over with. You will know who sent you before it is all over with. The feminine principle exists in everything that we know around us. It keeps, like we said, it nurtures us afterwards. We feed off of it. The female plants, their ovaries, whether you're smoking weed or whether you're eating fruits, those are the ovaries of the plants. It maintains us and keeps us at a high level. All right? And is the bridge from the natural to the supernatural. We understand that. So I want you to understand that even more so. So if you notice, we're at odds with everybody and everything around us. Notice what happened with Haiti. Notice what happens with us when we profess about how the black woman has this power. People come for our throats because you're different. See, these people act like they're godlike, but what happens when you tell them who Mother Nature really is? Who the supreme deity really is? They get angry. They get upset. They become belligerent. You can't have a civil conversation with them. They think that you're spitting blasphemy. But yet, isn't it crazy? Like I said before, the only time we gained our independence from these Europeans is when we accepted the mother deity, the female principle as the supreme deity. That's the only time we got free. So you think, what has changed? Haven't you looked across and seen that our situation ain't changed? Because you sitting up here allowing your man to... Oh my goodness, stop it. It's a war, brothers and sisters. It's a war. And the only way we're going to get to the next level is if we change up what we are. Change the definition of ourselves, being radioactive beings. We know that this to be the case. Okay? We know it to be the case. We see that the only thing that they're giving us is different aspects of the divine power we call the electromagnetic spectrum. The radio gives us our radio. The radio waves gives us our radio. Microwaves gives you your cell phones. Okay? All these things, you go in the hospital, x-ray machines. Okay? All these different things. So we have to understand this is what they're doing. And then it gets so deep on the esoteric level that you have to understand that most of their fraternities are named after brain waves. Gamma is the highest brain wave. Beta is next. Alpha after that. Delta, then theta. Okay? Or theta, then delta. But it goes in that order. So they understand that and they continue to keep telling you it's mysteries. No, remember what Dr. Pollack said. He said when they just start looking at individual molecules and not molecules collectively, then they lost how these things, the purpose of this energy, right? And then gaining an understanding of it. But they did that, it's all by design. Because they know when you're dealing with compartmentalized thought, these are the conclusions you will draw. They will be inadequate, to say the least. And we showed you, as we have detailed in these documents that we have provided for you, that compartmentalized information is very dangerous. Because now you get to see the real history of the so-called United States. All right? And that we were always here. Notice that 25 states or more still contain their Indian names. I'm from Michigan. That's an Indian name. Indiana, Illinois. Okay? North Dakota, South Dakota. Why would they keep the names if it was truly their possession? Because they know that they have to dominate the energy. These tribes that you are from, you're probably already in the state of your tribe and not even knowing it. Your energy has got back to what's called these ley lines or energy lines that are all across this so-called natural grid. And remember, the energy is everywhere. It's just waiting for you to expose yourself so that you can utilize it. We are living in the last days for them, but a new beginning for us. We are living in the last days for them, but a new beginning for us. Remember, this is the apocalypse, not in the newfound sense, in the societal construct that we are aware of it today, but in its old idea, which is the great reveal. I hope you guys have learned a lot. I mean, because we'll continue to expand and grow on these things, but you have to understand that the female principle is where it's at. Not to say that, You have to allow somebody to step on you, take advantage of you. Nothing like that. But acknowledge the power, because their science has already acknowledged the power and used it and have weaponized it. As you've seen an example of the world wars before there was a world war documented, that where did it all come back to? You and your people. That's where it's always going to be. I ask you, how are they trying to limit carbon when this is a carbon environment? Organic chemistry is the study of carbon, and everything contains carbon. So how are some beings running around here talking about there's too much carbon on the planet, or so-called planet? This is important. This is extremely important. I dedicate this to my son. I love you, Chunk Monk. I really do. Daddy loves you more than anything. I love you more than I love myself. He gave me purpose. And I just want to leave a legacy, fam. Find your inspiration. Do the work. Sync both hemispheres. Get into visualization. Eliminate the energy around you that's causing you to go to war within self at a level that is detrimental to the building process. If you can't change the people you're around, change the people you're around. Because I am a revolutionary. This is Project Power. No black woman, no power. When you know black women, you know power. FOF squad.